This is a dramatized story created for inspiration and entertainment. The events and characters depicted are fictional. For Maya, every day was a 12-hour battle, a marathon of refilling coffee cups and fighting off exhaustion, all while wearing a smile that hid the anxiety building up in her life. She moved through the familiar chaos of the Morningstar Cafe, a classic New York spot where the clatter of plates and the buzz of 100 conversations were the soundtrack to her struggle. She treated every customer with the same steady patience and gentle spirit, having no idea that the quiet, unassuming man in the corner booth, the one nursing a single black coffee for over an hour, was about to change her life forever. What happened next wouldn't just go viral, it would test her in ways she never saw coming and reveal that the greatest fortunes aren't always measured in dollars. If you believe that one moment of kindness can change a destiny and that a person's true worth is found in their character, not their bank account, be sure to subscribe and stay with us for this incredible story. The Morningstar Cafe on 2nd Avenue was an institution. It was a place that seemed to slow down time, always smelling of fresh coffee, bacon, and the sweet scent of pancake syrup. For tourists, it was a charming taste of the classic New York diner. For regulars, it was a reliable comfort. For Maya, it was her entire world. It was the place that, just barely, paid her rent, and the place that chipped away at her dreams, one long shift at a time. Her life was a repeating cycle of alarms before dawn, long subway rides, and endless hours on her feet. The smile she gave every customer was genuine, but it was also a shield. Behind it, she was carrying the weight of her family's debt, a burden left behind after her father's illness. Her own dream of opening a small art center for neighborhood kids felt like a distant, fading photograph from another life. There was no time for art, no money for supplies, and definitely no energy left at the end of a 12-hour day that left her bones aching. Today was especially rough. The lunch rush had been a storm of demanding customers and mixed-up orders. One man had yelled at her because his toast wasn't the right shade of brown. A woman complained loudly about the wait, ignoring the line of people snaking out the door. Through it all, Maya moved with a practiced calm. Her voice never rose, her patience a quiet force against the city's relentless impatience. She was the anchor in the daily storm, the one who remembered the regulars' orders and always had a kind word for her flustered co-workers. As the afternoon lull finally settled over the cafe, a homeless man named Frank, a familiar face in the neighborhood, shuffled in. He was older, with a coat that was way too thin for the autumn chill. He stood nervously by the door, his eyes scanning the room. Other staff members tensed up, ready to ask him to leave, a part of the job they all hated but felt they had to do. But Maya caught his eye and gave him a small, reassuring nod. She walked over, not with suspicion, but with a glass of water and a warm smile. "It's cold out there, Frank," she said softly, her voice just for him. "Let me get you something warm, it's on me." She went behind the counter, ignoring a disapproving look from her manager, and poured a steaming cup of soup into a to-go container. She added a couple of bread rolls, put them in a bag, and handed it to him. He looked at her with watery eyes, mumbled a "thank you," and quickly shuffled back out into the cold. It was a small act, one she had done in different ways 100 times before. It was a gesture that came from a deep, unshakable empathy, not a desire for attention. She didn't know that this simple, quiet moment of compassion was being watched. In the corner booth, a man named Arthur Harrison lowered the newspaper he'd been hiding behind. He was dressed in worn jeans and a faded coat, looking more like a retired professor than the reclusive tech billionaire he actually was. He'd come to the diner for a little anonymity, a break from a world where his name opened every door but connected him to no one. He had watched the entire exchange with Frank. He saw the manager's frown and the other customers who looked away, and then he saw Maya's simple, unhesitating kindness. He had spent his life surrounded by people who were generous for cameras and awards, but this was different. This was real. He also didn't notice the teenager at the counter, phone held discreetly, who had been filming a TikTok of her latte art and accidentally captured the whole thing in the background. She hadn't even realized what she'd recorded. Not yet. That evening, the teenager, a girl named Chloe, posted her video. The focus was supposed to be her latte, but in the background, out of focus but undeniably clear, was the scene with Maya and Frank. Chloe added a simple caption, "My barista is the nicest person on earth." She didn't think much of it, but the internet saw what she saw. Within hours, the video wasn't about the latte anymore. The algorithm, in its mysterious way, had found the heart of the story. People started commenting, sharing, and reacting. The clip was reposted with the focus now zoomed in on Maya's gentle interaction. The caption changed from "My barista" to "Waitress shows humanity to a homeless man." By the next morning, it had 1 million views. By noon, 10 million. The comments poured in. "This is what kindness looks like," one person wrote. Another said, "In a world full of people filming for clout, she did this when she thought no one was watching." Hashtags started trending. Diner Angel, NYC Kindness, Be Like Maya. Maya showed up to work completely unaware of her new internet fame. It was her manager who broke the news, showing her the video on his phone. His earlier disapproval now replaced with a weird mix of shock and awe. Maya watched, her face turning pale. She felt sick. It was an invasion of her privacy, a private moment twisted into a public show. She wasn't an angel. She was just a person who tried to do a small, decent thing. The sudden attention was terrifying. But the story was just getting started. Later that day, a journalist at a major news outlet was scrolling through the video and noticed something no one else had. They recognized the blurry figure in the corner booth, the man in the worn coat who had lowered his newspaper to watch Maya. "Wait a minute," the journalist muttered to their screen. "Is that Arthur Harrison?" A quick check against some old rare photos confirmed it. The reclusive billionaire, a man who hadn't been photographed in public for almost a decade, was in the background of the viral video. The story blew up. The headlines basically wrote themselves. "Reclusive billionaire Arthur Harrison witnesses viral act of kindness, and waitress's good deed captures the attention of a billionaire." Now the focus shifted. It wasn't just about Maya's kindness anymore. It was about the billionaire who saw it. What would he do? Would he reward her? The internet was buzzing with theories. It became a modern-day fairy tale. Reporters swarmed the Morning Star Cafe, hoping for a comment from Maya, or even less likely, from Harrison himself. Maya felt like she was drowning. Her simple life had been hijacked. People on the street recognized her. Old friends she hadn't heard from in years were suddenly calling, their voices tinged with a new, weird excitement. She was no longer just Maya, the waitress. She was the viral waitress, a character in a story she never asked to be in. The pressure was immense. She just wanted to disappear, to go back to her quiet, anonymous life of refilling coffee cups. Meanwhile, in his penthouse overlooking Central Park, Arthur Harrison watched the storm he was now at the center of. He'd seen the headlines and read the wild speculation. His first instinct was to retreat further, to let the story die down. But he couldn't forget what he had seen. It wasn't just an act of kindness. It was an act of integrity. In a world that was all about transactions, Maya's compassion was real. He realized that retreating was the easy choice, the one he always made. But for the first time in a long, long time, he felt he had to do something different. He had to step out of the shadows. A week after the video went viral, a sleek black car, looking totally out of place, pulled up outside Maya's worn-down apartment building in Queens. A woman in a sharp suit knocked on her door and introduced herself as Arthur Harrison's chief of staff. Maya's heart hammered against her ribs. She thought it was a prank or maybe a lawsuit. She cautiously let the woman in. The offer wasn't what she expected. There was no giant check, no flashy car, no empty gesture. Instead, the woman talked about the Eleanor Harrison Foundation for Urban Compassion, a private organization Arthur had founded in his late wife's name. He'd let it become stagnant, run by a board that cared more about tax benefits than actual impact. Mr. Harrison was deeply moved by what he witnessed, the chief of staff explained. He believes that genuine compassion, the kind you showed, is the most important resource for changing a community. He's realized his foundation has lost its way. It's become a corporate machine disconnected from the people it's supposed to serve. Then came the life-altering part. Arthur Harrison wanted Maya to join the foundation, not as a low-level employee, but as a special consultant to be trained for the role of executive director of a new community outreach initiative. He wasn't offering her a reward. He was offering her a responsibility. He wanted her to take the same empathy she showed a homeless man and apply it on a scale that could help thousands. He wanted to fund her dream of a community art center, not as a one-time project, but as the flagship program for this new initiative. Maya was speechless. It was an impossible dream being handed to her. It was everything she had ever wanted, a chance to make a real difference, a way out of her crushing debt. But a cold knot of fear tightened in her stomach. She was a waitress. She knew how to balance 6 plates on one arm, not how to run a multi-million-dollar foundation. Who was she to sit in a boardroom with people who had Ivy League degrees? I don't know anything about running a foundation, she stammered. Mr. Harrison believes you know something more important, the woman replied. You know how to see people. After a sleepless night, Maya said yes. Her life changed overnight. She left the familiar chaos of the Morning Star Cafe and entered the sterile, intimidating world of corporate philanthropy. The first few months were brutal. She was drowning in imposter syndrome. In meetings, she was surrounded by people using acronyms she didn't understand and talking about financial projections that made her head spin. Some board members were openly skeptical, their polite smiles barely hiding their condescending attitude. They saw her as a viral sensation Mr. Harrison had hired on a whim. The media didn't help. A tabloid ran a story titled, "From Waitress to Director, is Billionaire's pet project a PR stunt?" They dug into her past and printed details about her family's debt, making her feel exposed and judged. Even her relationships with old friends became strained. Some were jealous while others treated her like a stranger. She felt profoundly lonely, caught between two worlds and belonging to neither. There were moments she wanted to quit and run back to the simplicity of the cafe, where the biggest problem was a cold order of fries. But then she'd remember why she was there. She started visiting the neighborhoods the foundation was supposed to be serving, not as an executive but as herself. She just listened. She sat in community centers and talked to single mothers, to unemployed fathers, to the very people her colleagues only saw as statistics on a spreadsheet. She brought their stories back to the boardroom. When the board proposed a grant for a high-tech job training program, Maya gently interrupted. "That's a great idea," she said, her voice shaking a little at first. "But the people I spoke to aren't worried about coding right now. They're worried about childcare. They can't take a training course if they can't afford a babysitter. They need a safe place for their kids first." Silence. It was a simple, obvious truth that all the experts had completely overlooked. It was the same clarity she had in the diner, the logic of human need. Slowly things started to shift. Her real-world perspective began to cut through the corporate jargon. She championed smaller, more direct projects, a community-run daycare, a food pantry that looked like a real grocery store to give people dignity, and finally the art center she had always dreamed of. It was a vibrant, welcoming space where kids from all backgrounds could paint and draw for free. One afternoon, a year after her life turned upside down, Maya was at the opening of that art center. The room was buzzing with the laughter of children, their hands covered in paint. Arthur Harrison stood quietly in a corner, watching the scene with a genuine smile on his face. He walked over to Maya, who was helping a little girl mix colors. "I had a theory," Arthur said, his voice low, "that the world isn't changed by grand gestures, but by countless, small, authentic acts of compassion. You proved me right." Maya looked around at the joyful chaos, at the real-life result of her impossible journey. She finally felt like she belonged. "You gave me the opportunity," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "But the people in this room did the rest. I just listened." Arthur shook his head slightly. "You did more than listen. You reminded a group of very powerful people what it means to be human. You taught me that my wife's legacy isn't a building with her name on it. It's this. It's the kindness that ripples outward." He admitted that he had been lost, isolated by his own wealth, and that her simple, honest act had been a lifeline, reminding him of the world beyond his boardroom. True strength, he realized, wasn't found in building an empire, but in the courage to connect with a single person. Maya's story became a different kind of legend. It wasn't just a viral moment about a waitress and a billionaire anymore. It became a story about the quiet power of empathy in a world that often shouts. It's a reminder that the most valuable thing you can offer someone isn't money, but the simple dignity of being seen. Humanity still exists, not always in the spotlight, but in the quiet corners, in unassuming cafes, and in the hearts of people who choose kindness when no one is watching. What does kindness mean to you? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And for more stories that inspire and remind us of the good in the world, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications.